For our big news discussion this week, I decided to eventually and finally read that interview with Phil Spencer. And so I gathered information from that as well as 2 other articles, and I compiled it into here to discuss some things about Game Pass, some things about Next Generation, some things about Project xCloud. So, all stuff that can be related to not only just Xbox, but what other people do in the future as well.
All right.
So here's what I gathered. The article, first of all, is the interview was with Wesley Yin Poole at Eurogamer.
Forget that's me.
You have an Asian last name?
Well, all that anime he watches, yeah.
Well, no, they may be related because they have the same first name.
Oh, sure.
Wow.
That's how that works. Yeah.
That is how that works, actually.
Yep.
For those of you that are outside of America, that's how that works.
It's cheap. So most of this is my notes. Some of it is actual codes. So the success of a game on Game Pass is currently measured simply by how many people are playing it. Though that may get more complex in the future. Game Pass is fostering a community of gamers who are willing to try different games they already have access to them instead of buying them outright. We talked about earlier around the EA conversation. And in my opinion, this is actually kind of replacing the point of GameStop. Remember, in previous generations, or previous times, you could go into a GameStop, get the newest game, be like, play it for like a week or two, and be like, I'm not liking this. I'm going to go back and get some money back for it and use it to buy something else. Or even, it didn't have to be a new game. It could just be a game that's been out for, 6 months, a year now. It's pre-owned. You get it. You play for a little bit. Not liking it that much. Return it. So, but in recent times, that's been less popular because digital is taking on the majority of purchases. People don't want to go out to GameStops anymore as much as they used to. GameStop is not doing as well anymore.
GameStop, do what I said.
Yeah. So I think with Game Pass and similar subscriptions in the future, you're gonna see things like that happen because people don't have to buy things anymore. They can just try it. You pay $10 a month if you're on console. If you want Ultimate, you can pay $15 a month or whatever it is, and you get access to all this shit that you can try out. And if you don't like it, all you gotta do is just delete it off your console, and you didn't waste any money. You have access to all the other things on the platform, all the other things on the subscription service. So I think it's kind of replacing the whole renting games or buying games and returning them sort of thing that GameStop kind of fulfilled for a while now, or even like Redbox. You can still rent games on Redbox.
Oh yeah,
GameFly.
I was gonna say, and GameFly is basically
all the GameFly commercials.
You can still get stuff from GameFly. They actually sell like their used stuff that's older, so sometimes you can find some good deals on there. But yeah. So I think that's what that's gonna do. When talking about Gears, they talked about Gears a little bit. Gears 5 sold well and sold more copies than Gears 4. Phil wants players to have that choice of playing a game on Game Pass or buying it outright, as we just talked about. Quote, right now, the easiest metric to talk to Rod or anybody about the success, Rod Ferguson, which is the guy from the Coalition, the developer. How many players do we find with this game? And let the gamers choose how they actually want to get the entitlement for the game. It is an evolution, there's no doubt. Studios have been trained that what I look at is what are my day one sales? What are my week one sales? And as an industry, the press wants to know that. Or the press wants to know, hey, how do I judge Gears 5 if Gears 5 has been a success? Colin's been talking about this too. He's like, I don't know how well it did. It did really well. It did review well. It has a ton of players. We're taking feedback on certain things. The economy, I see the feedback on the game as well. But I thought it was a great release in the Gears franchise, and it drove a ton of players who wanted to go play, and that's awesome. That's what he said about that. And then I wanted to read...
GameFly is owned by EA.
Well, there's your problem.
No wonder why I don't use them.
I think they were bought by them, though. It wasn't started by them.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
It's been around since... Geez, it's been around since 2002?
Can you imagine?
Really?
I didn't know that.
And it's had the same CEO for almost... for every year except for a year after its inception?
Can you imagine you have to pay to make your account, and then you have to pay for the games, and then you have to pay for shipping?
No, you don't do all that.
And you have to pay for the UPS driver's lunch.
And then you have to pay for the enjoyment of the game.
Well,
Yeah, microtransactions.
If you liked it, give us 5 stars. That'll be $50, please.
Someone's at my front door.
It's me.
No, it's not.
So then I wanted to read this whole
Cheap.
part. So this is gonna be a little bit long-winded, but let's get through it. So this part of the interview was about launch day games relating to Scarlett, among other things.
Okay, this should be interesting.
So it says here, the question is also kind of long. The question was, you've committed to having your first party. Oh, this is also related to Game Pass. You committed to having your first party games launch on Game Pass day and date with retail. In fact, you put all of them on there. This is in stark contrast to Sony's approach. Sony does not put its big first party games, the God of Wars, the Spider-Mans, on PlayStation Now day and date. There is a really interesting quote from Jim Ryan in a recent interview with our sister site, GamesIndustry.biz, where he talked about why Sony does this, and I'd love to get your take on it. He said, and I quote, given how some of the first-party IP is incredibly special and valuable, we just want to treat them with amazing care and respect, and have those launches be clean and pure. Quote, what I think he says there is our first big party games are too good to give away on a subscription. That's such a different approach to what you guys are doing. How do you apply that to thinking to Gears 5, for example? Does putting it on a subscription platform day and date detract from the sense of it being this big, great first party title? And then Phil responded, it hasn't in any other form of media. I don't think people look at Game of Thrones and say somehow it wasn't quality because it shipped instead of a subscription. I think most people would look at the amount of investment and quality of the execution that happens in TV, at least in the subscription, as being incredibly high. Well, I'll say for us, and I'm trying to figure out how much I want to dive into this because it could get messy, giving developers a business model that's already working on a scale inside of a subscription, and I think there's some confusion out there whether Game Pass works. Game Pass works as a business model. There's no doubt about that. Even today, it works. It works incredibly well. Allows us to go in and invest in the studio acquisitions we've done and the quality of content we're building up over the next 2 or 3 years that's going to show up. It's an integral part of the business model that allows that, and we also do retail. I think those games can be and will be very special. I think Gears 5 can be Game of the Year, can be a Game of the Year award winner. This is before we saw the nominations for the Game Awards, which isn't the only game awards show out there, but that's one of the big ones. I think Outer Worlds can be a Game of the Year award winner, which is on for the Game Awards. The fact that it shipped inside of Game Pass and found more players does not take away from the experience. In fact, it is inviting more people in. Gamers in general, there is sometimes a tendency to get the more. Sorry, let me restart this. Gamers in general, there is sometimes a tendency that the more walls we put up around things, the more valuable it is. But if we're focused on growing the games industry, we should not be less accessible. We should be more accessible. We had this argument for years over crossplay, whether or not we should allow people to play across different platforms, or does that somehow diminish the value of an individual platform? The thing that at the highest level, which will probably get me in trouble, is as gamers, you should focus on what you want, not focus on like my P&L. He's talking about profit and loss statement, or the P&L of the console you choose to invest in. I see this dialogue about somebody worried about somehow Xbox is going to make less money and their console is going to make less money if they tell me a game is going to be on a different platform before it actually comes out, or it's going to be a subscription, which is really what I want, but somehow that's going to mean less money for them. So I don't want to do that because I'd rather pay more money. So you should focus on you as a gamer and the things that matter to you. We as the people running the business, I'm incented to run a good business inside Microsoft in the long term. I've been here for 31 years. I don't know that I'll make 31 more, but I'm not going anywhere tomorrow. We're building an Xbox business for the long run. I'll tell you, Game Pass today is a strong part of that, and it continues to get stronger, and it supports the building of great IP. So the things that I took of note here were I don't think I think people are getting a little bit too caught up in two things. Is that people are getting caught up in does Game Pass work? Is launching games on Game Pass day and date good for Xbox? Is launching games on PC and Xbox at the same time good for Xbox? Two things are, one, he says yes, it works. It's been working. We're running a successful business here. And then the other thing he says is like, you shouldn't worry too much about that as a gamer. And I kind of didn't, I kind of feel this. He's basically saying like, you guys, sometimes you guys think too much about, does this work for us? It does work for us. Like, we're making it work for us. If it didn't work for us, we wouldn't be doing it. it's working for the developers too. The developers who put their games on Game Pass are getting money on Game Pass. Otherwise, their games wouldn't be on Game Pass. He's basically saying like, he's basically just saying like, as a gamer, you should focus on what you want and what you want to play. If you want to play the games that are on Xbox and Xbox Game Pass, get an Xbox. If you want to play the games that are on PlayStation, get a PlayStation. He's like, don't worry about, am I losing my own value by buying a game on Xbox that's also available on PC because there's not enough walls up around it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's what I gathered from this statement, basically.
Yeah, it's interesting because especially us as a podcast.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, us as a podcast and people who are journalists have the right to discuss these sorts of things because that's what we do. That's what we're discussing things. But that shouldn't be a concern for someone who just wants to play some games.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It's just like it's good for even people like us or people that are doing journalism and stuff to take a step back.
Feel free to question things, of course.
Yeah.
But I think his point is just like, don't worry about it too much.
Yeah.
Just like if it's working as a business, we'll keep doing it. If it's not, we won't do it. And don't worry about your value of buying a game on Xbox being diminished because of that.
Yeah.
You got something to say, Trey? You've been thinking. I can see you thinking. He's got the
we
face on.
Yeah, we always
again.
hear the gears turning. They started clicking and clacking.
I fucking hate you.
Stop.
I can guarantee I'm most likely thinking about this too hard. I think worrying is good. Not in its entirety. I think mostly I definitely agree with what he's saying. If you want to buy it, buy it. If you don't want to buy it, don't buy it.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I feel like when it comes to how well you're doing or how well something works, true as the business, you can obviously tell for yourself, hey, this isn't hey, this is working, or hey, this isn't working. And this is probably, and I think the emphasis on what he's saying to kind of refute what I'm going to say is don't worry about it for the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I also feel like as the consumer, I also have a different point of view on whether or not something's working that you probably wouldn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see what you're saying with that.
Yeah. All right. I hope that made sense.
I know what you're saying there.
Yeah, cause yeah, that's a very, very legitimate concern as to whether or not Game Pass works.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anyone wants it to fail.
Yeah.
So it's not. So I guess at this point, I guess for me it would be like, I was confident that Game Pass would work.
Yeah.
I just want to know how well it would work.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously if you're getting money. If something is really effective for you, you're getting the most amount of money that you could out of it, then that's going to incentivize you to varying degrees.
Yeah. If
you're just breaking even, okay, you could consider it a success. But you're going to think, is there something that I could have done to make it hit harder?
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you're concerned for them, you might be thinking, is it more effective for them to do Game Pass, or is it more effective for them to go another route or go back to what it was before?
Yeah.
But obviously, yes, some people are way too concerned.
Yeah.
So they might be like, I have to get an Xbox to support Microsoft, and it's like, and I think what he's saying is don't think like that.
Yeah.
Think in terms of you.
There's a few things here that he talks about. One of them is Game Pass in terms of if I buy Game Pass and I play The Outer Worlds, is my money going to Obsidian? Like, am I supporting Obsidian enough? Or am I not giving them as much money as I could if I just bought the game outright? And of course, you will give them money directly if you buy the game outright. But I think he talks about here is like, yeah, I mean, developers obviously like this. It's working for them. There's games that aren't Xbox exclusive or even launch exclusive for Xbox that have launched into Game Pass. I can't remember what exactly they are right now. Mm-hmm. I think maybe Darksiders did. I know Darksiders is on Game Pass right now, the third one. and there's other games out there that have done that. And then there's another part which I've heard a lot of people talk about, which is if Xbox is releasing Sea of Thieves or Halo Infinite on the Xbox and the PC, then it's not really an exclusive. And he's like, sure, but it's working for us, so why are you so worried about it? I think that's what he's saying. He's like, if just because it's not exclusive to the console, and you can't like match it directly with like Sony's PlayStation approach. I think it's like he's saying, like, don't be so worried about it. You're still getting a game that that's exclusive to you. You can't play it on PlayStation, and you're getting a good game. If you want to play that good game, buy an Xbox or buy a PC.
And like I said, I don't at least for me, I don't think it's like huge. I agree with what he's saying. But as the consumer who wants to see you guys succeed as well as you possibly can, I think the concern is valid, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
To be like if I already have a good PC, which we all do.
Yeah.
And if a game is on both Xbox and PC, how much does Xbox cost right now?
During Black Friday, you could get one for like $150, I think, or $200. Yeah, well, you could get PS4 for $200 with that bundle that came with the 3 exclusives.
Okay.
So like it's around that area right now. $200, I'd say, is $200, $250 is the really good point right now where it's at.
All right, so let's just take that price point for now. So I think the concern stems from, true, I got a good game. Mm-hmm. So yay, like the consumer won in that spectrum. But you also just lost out on $150, which might not seem like much because it's Microsoft.
Yeah.
They have like stacks on stacks. But that multiplied by, say, I don't know, let's say 2 million people get the game.
Mm-hmm.
That's 150 times 2-3 million.
Yeah.
Which is a lot. So obviously it's not going to ruin Microsoft in any spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely see the concern there because that's, to you, that's a lot of money.
I know for a fact, because I've heard this multiple times in the industry, that software makes a lot more money than hardware does.
Yes.
Because they can sell a lot more units of software, for sure. Because not only can you have multiple accounts on a console and things along those lines, but you have multiple people playing on the same console and things like that. And on top of that, hardware costs something to make.
Yes.
Where software is a little bit different, it's a little bit more muddled. There's, obviously, if you're a first party, there's development costs in giving the first party developer money. If you're a third party, it's really just about putting it up on the storefront and keeping it there.
Yes. Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. I don't remember.
And I would say if you accounted for that, so you made less Xboxes to, like I said, to compensate,
mm-hmm.
then I'd have been like, okay, that's a very smart move. But I don't think they did. I could be wrong. I don't think they did. So like you said, that's hardware that you spent money to make that you're not making anything on.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least not as much as you would. So like I said, the concern, I do think it should be there, at least more than what he's saying there should be. But yeah, some people do go
mm-hmm.
a little bit too, they run away with it.
Yeah, I think the thing that you probably need those you need those console sellers for. The console sellers is really at this point the most important is going to be at launch.
Yes.
That's what's going to be the most important, is like you need people to buy your console at launch. Obviously the games are still going to come to PC. But in my opinion, if you want to play those games on PC, that's fine for them. They're just going to have to if you aren't going to buy an Xbox to play the exclusive on the Xbox, then you don't really care about console that much. Basically, right?
I can see that, yeah.
That's a whole conversation too. But we got to move on because we got plenty more to go through. All right, moving on to the next part. When talking about studios and acquisitions, Phil says they're not done with acquiring studios at Xbox. He understands full well that these guys are studios and not trading cards, and he wants them to be given the opportunity to build great games. There's more context to that statement, but that's basically what he said. And then it says, quote, "It's not really some kind of PR battle about how many new acquisitions can we put on a stage, but if we're not building great games, the acquisitions don't matter." And then I also put in here that Microsoft's higher-ups are giving their support to keep looking to buy more studios. So the CEO of Microsoft and other higher-ups at Microsoft are giving Xbox has their blessing to buy more studios. Basically, is what he said.
Good.
When asked about what kinds of studios he's looking for, he said, quote, "I would love to have more of an influence in our own first-party team from Asian creators. There's nothing that's imminent, so it's not like a pre-announce or something. But if you just plotted where we are on the map within our first party, that's a real opportunity for us. So that's some place that he'd like to see covered. He'd like to get some more, and we've seen them start to make more of a relationship with Japanese creators and stuff like that, with bringing Final Fantasy to Game Pass and bringing the Kingdom Hearts games finally over to the Xbox and stuff along those lines. Oh, and the Yakuza games.
Me sick.
Good Yakuza.
When asked about the concern for selling consoles when Scarlett and xCloud are on the horizon, he discussed that there are a lot of gamers who don't pay attention to the industry like that, and many can't tell you when the next generation is coming or when the last one ended. He also mentioned that there are still millions of players on Xbox 360 every month.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of players who do not know that Scarlett is coming next year, and there's a lot of people who don't know that xCloud is a thing.
Hell, what was it?
Or what
there
that
was
means.
there was a guy 2 years ago when I was still working at GameStop, asking if he could buy a PS5. And we were like,
Cheap.
what? And he was like, yeah, I read an article that the PS5 was coming out today. I'm like, no.
You got gypped, buddy.
Yeah, we were just like,
okay.
no. He's like, oh, when is it coming out? And I was like, if I had to take a guess, I'd say 2020, 2021. He's like, oh.
Look at
This man was on WokenNews.com.
Exactly. That reminds me of when we were at Olive Garden in 2014, I think it was.
What?
What's
his memory?
I remember discussing something with our waiter about something about like PS4 and Xbox, and he was like talking about like, yeah, like, you know, I didn't get an Xbox, all that DRM shit and this and that. And I'm like, you know, they got rid of that like less than a week or two after that was announced, right? And he didn't know because he didn't keep up with that. The whole problem with Xbox's launch made such a big splash that people didn't know that they reverted it, which is why you have to be right out of the gate.
Yes. Oh, and real quick, I wanted to touch on the whole Asian creators and Japanese games. Maybe they have, and they like said it, but I'm really interested to find out why the the audience, I want to know why those type of games, like, you know, anime games, Japanese games, do not sell that well on Xbox. I'm very interested to pinpoint what the disconnect is, whereas there is a connect on PS4.
It might just be simply interest in terms of buying it, which I guess kind of makes it a good idea to put Final Fantasy games on Game Pass, because now people can they're like, oh,
They can explore.
I already own Game Pass. I'll download Final Fantasy VII. I've heard a lot about this game, and I'll play it. And now you can explore. I think that's just really the market right now. But I think it's going to evolve as we start getting more agnostic coming into this next generation, where there's going to be a lot more of a head-to-head battle between the Xbox and PlayStations of the world.
Next.
Phil did not confirm or deny multiple SKUs of the next generation Xbox. We've heard of, and to talk about this real quickly, we've heard of Project Lockhart, which was supposed to be a less powerful Xbox. Scarlett. Scarlett's the actual one. Project Lockhart was supposed to be the other one. That seemingly did exist, but no longer exists based on some wording that they've used in the past. But we don't know anything about what was referred to as Project Anaconda, which I believe was supposed to be the streaming-only box version of Xbox. We don't know if that's a thing anymore. But Phil did make it clear that the option is never off the table. So he was basically like, I'm not going to answer your question, but I will say that we're not saying no to it ever happening in general. So it's possible that you see multiple SKUs of the Xbox Scarlett or whatever it may be in the future. And then we have two more things for this one. The quote about price and performance being on par. The quote we talked about a couple weeks ago or last week about them being on par with price and performance with PlayStation 5. It was from this interview. And then the last thing is I want to read one more question and answer, which isn't as long as the first one. So this is important. Moving on to streaming. This is the question. Would you consider trading selling consoles if it meant you had ownership of streaming? Like you own video game streaming globally? So Phil replied, no. Two no's.
Right.
Streaming is not a replacement for the console experience today. I'll be open. We looked at that. When Satya, the CEO of Microsoft, and the board gives us the freedom to go drive gaming for Microsoft, we don't mandate that we make Project Scarlett. Or they don't mandate that we make Project Scarlett. They don't mandate that we go do streaming. They say we want to become a global leader in gaming. We want to build our first party. We want to build up the platform. We've got complete hardware capability, and we looked at it and we said, should we do Project Scarlett? A bit like we did with the X. We did Project Scorpio, and we said, should we do Xbox? Why should the Xbox One X exist? And we said we want to design a 4K console. And certain people made fun of us when we said that. Is it true 4K? I think that now people look at it and say, okay, it's capable of doing 4K. Not every game will, but it's capable. So we looked and we said, will Project Scarlett play a role in the gaming future we see? And that's really a question of, is playing local on a local device in your home still the best way to play for many, many years? We're as invested in cloud as anybody in terms of the in terms of the cost standpoint. And we said, yeah, local play on a device is going to be the best way to play, whether it's a gaming PC or console, and that's for years. So if you ask me today, would I go in on all streaming and ignore the console? Project Scarlett is the most important thing we're doing next year. Leading in the console industry is something we want to do both in sales as well as leading in things like crossplay, back compat, Game Pass, and all of the other innovations we've brought into the Xbox One. Yeah, we're going to continue to invest in cloud because we think it allows us to bring that experience to more and more people. But we're years away from competing from a fidelity standpoint and a kind of feel for what people do on a local device. So Phil is definitely in the camp of we're not replacing gaming on a console or PC with streaming.
But people like to watch movies
soon.
on their game consoles.
That's exclusively what I do on my game console.
Nice.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the whole interview with Phil. I wanted to run through a few quick things real quickly with I just wanted to do a couple or three questions. Yeah, three questions with Matt Booty, which we talked about before. He's the head of Xbox Game Studios, so he's the head of the first party over there at Microsoft now, which used to be called Microsoft Studios. They changed the name, I think, last year. And this article This article and interview comes from Josh West at Games Radar. So the question first was, I'm sure if you were to ask our readers, they would say something along the lines of, more first-party games, please. Matt Bodie replied, we really feel good heading into 2020. We've got a goal of being able to deliver a game roughly every 3 to 4 months. We have a little bit of work to do to get there. It'll be lumpy, but we're closer than we were. And so we feel really good about going into 2020 and the run-up to Project Scarlett with our content lineup. So they say their goal is to deliver a game every 3 to 4 months, first party wise, meaning that could mean multiple things. That can mean a first party exclusive. That can mean a Xbox console exclusive launch, I'm sure. And I'm sure that'll probably be more bigger games, but like still first party launches and things along those lines.
I'm going to emphasize roughly.
Yeah. He does say roughly.
Because a lot of people, like...
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't think they want to hold themselves to the standard. They don't want to be like, we got to release a game these months.
It's
Otherwise,
the 4th
we're gonna,
month. Where is it?
Yeah, I think it's just like, we want to try to get this out. Like, we want to be able to kind of have a steady flow of content. That's what he's basically saying.
Okay.
But I'm looking forward to the way he sounds about it. And then he says, the question says, you mentioned that there would be more game announcements before the end of the year. What's behind the decision to continue revealing new projects and supporting Xbox One with Project Scarlett set to launch in holiday 2020? Matt replied, it's interesting you bring that up. I think we want people to feel comfortable investing in Xbox. And whether that means that this holiday you're going to buy an Xbox One S or next fall you're going to buy a Scarlett, you're going to feel comfortable either way. And that content library that you invest in is going to go forward with you so that you don't have to feel like you're making a choice between generations, right? I think that's really important to us. Talking about the fact that you can buy Xbox One games that came out now or within the next year, and you're going to be able to play those games on your Scarlett because of backwards compatibility.
Good old Pat back.
Yes.
And the last question was, when you talk about the content library moving forward with you, could we reasonably expect that Project Scarlett will have the largest launch lineup of any Xbox system? Matt replied, I love that way you phrased it. I love the way you phrased it that way. I think that's how we think about it. We want, when you invest in Xbox, to know that you're bringing that legacy content library with you. It's why we think we've got an advantage with Project Scarlett, because our goal is that any game that runs on Xbox One will run on the Scarlett. You're not porting to a different operating system. You're not porting to a different graphics API. You're just running an Xbox game, right? So we hope that's the big advantage in terms of our initial content library. Basically saying, because everything on day one that works on the Xbox One will work on the Scarlett, when you buy that new console, you already have the library. There's already a breadth of games that you may or may not have already played. Some you may have. Some might be like Destiny, where you want to go back and continue playing that game. Or maybe The Outer Worlds came out this year and you haven't played it yet and you feel like playing it next fall. You can go back and play that on the same device that you just purchased in the highest fidelity that console is capable of running. And that's the thing that they're hoping would be a pretty big advantage for them going into the next generation. And then the last thing is, it seems that Xbox is all in on the idea that when a new game launches next generation, it will be an Xbox game rather than being a Scarlett game or a game for the Xbox One. Although I assume there will be a few Scarlett exclusives, obviously due to the sheer power that the new consoles have, because that's just how it works. But you know how in past years or past generation switches, you have games that release on both consoles. And he talked about it here that, like, or I think it might have been Phil. I can't remember if it was Phil that talked about it or if it was Matt that talked about it. It seemed like first parties, all the first party games are going to come out as Xbox games. You probably will be able to buy them once and you have access to them on the Xbox One or the Scarlett. He says, I don't want to speak for third parties though. It's like, EA might do something different. They might be like, okay, we want to release a different SKU for the original and one for the Scarlett. And same goes for the other consoles too, PS4 and PS5. Hopefully, because backwards compatibility is going to be in at launch, that just doesn't happen. Hopefully, it's just you buy it on Xbox and you have access to it on your One or the Scarlett. It just runs differently on both. If it's available on the One. It might not be available on the One, but that's what's going to have to be determined.
That's good.
Nice.
And the last thing I'll mention is that he seems pretty enthusiastic about the Initiative, which is the new developer that Microsoft started last year. Remember that? They called it Quadruple A.
Forget emphasizing booty.
Though he wouldn't share many more details. And that is our big discussion.
Thanks everyone for watching the Market Podcast. This has been episode 8. Remember to give it a like on the video if you enjoyed yourself. Comment. We want to hear y'all's opinion on today's topics. Subscribe if you want to see more, and don't forget, if some of you bros are sitting there wishing you could listen to the show while you're doing your homework or whatever you all get into, look no further. We're on a number of podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Castbox, etc. All links are down in the description below. Same goes for you audio listeners. If there's anything you wanted to see from this episode, hop over to the YouTube at Black Market Gaming. Show you boys some love, man. We're out of here.
Check out the highlights on our social medias.
Yes.
Those have been going up.
Go like our Facebook page, Black Market Gaming. Go to our Twitter account and follow Black Market Gaming. Go to our Instagram and follow Black Market Gaming.
Oh, I forgot to pull this down.
This has been Black Market Gaming signing out. Goodbye, everybody.